he's just one of those once-in-a-generation type players, and you could talk about it where, people think that there's a price for everything, but for you, if you're running the Bengals, there's no price for Joe Burrow.
That's right. You remember your grandparents used to tell you some things aren't for sale, right? It's like, I think recently we've come to kind of, adopt the motto that almost anything's for sale. Everything has a price. Well, no, not. There's some things you wouldn't sell. Your firstborn, you wouldn't sell. Joe Burrow, you wouldn't sell. And if any team's willing to give up a king's ransom for him, I think that should tell you what you actually have in your hand. And so, no, I would be inclined to keep him. I think, let's face it, 2019, we saw one of the greatest college football seasons by a quarterback in college football history. He ran through a gauntlet of top 10 defenses, 7 in all, to go 15-0, and then to slice and dice Oklahoma for 8 touchdowns in the semifinal game. And then what he did with Brent Venables and that defense against Clemson, they hit him early. He got off the mat and came back and sliced and diced them up. So, no, he showed us everything every single week that you need to see in a quarterback you're going to take this high.
Solomon, this scenario kind of reminds me of what the Bengals went through in the early 2000s, 2003, when they selected Carson Palmer number 1 overall. I'm guessing they were probably in that same boat where they're like, we're going to take the Heisman Trophy winner. He's going to be our franchise guy for the next decade going forward. Is that the same sort of groupthink that they're going through right now in Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone would. I mean, think about it. Now, the Bengals, I think there's been this false narrative that they're one of the worst franchises in the NFL. And all you have to do is look at the last decade. If you had a team that went to the playoffs 5 times over the last 10 years, you wouldn't consider them to be one of the worst teams in the NFL because that's what they did. The quarterback position is the most valuable position in our sport. With the quarterback, that position helps you to understand, in terms of wins, losses. They're going to be one of the biggest determining factors. So in 2003, when they took Carson Palmer, there were hopes that he would be the franchise quarterback. And, Carson was the quarterback that took that team that was kind of like the Titanic, had been sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And then a few years later, after he became a starter, he took them to the playoffs. He got them in there. And so he was the guy that kind of got that organization going again. He ended up leaving in 2010 at the end of the decade to go to Oakland and then Arizona. But I think he had fulfilled his mission. By the time he left, he had taken them to the playoffs multiple times.
Solomon, getting back to Burrow and Cincy, I know Zach Taylor, the head coach, was criticized for maybe he was in over his head for some of this year. I mean, he didn't have the greatest quarterback situation with Dalton. But if Burrow comes in there, it's not like the cupboard's bare for him. Tyler Boyd's legit, right? A.J. Green is back. They franchised him. Yep. Let's assume he's healthy. You got Mixon. You've got a pretty good tight end. He's got weapons. And I don't know anything about their offensive coordinator or Taylor as an offensive guy, but he's got weapons there. I'm not saying that they're going to the playoffs, but I think he'll be able to do some damage.
No, you're right. It starts with A.J. Green. You're right. Tyler Boyd is phenomenal. He's one of the best slot receivers in the game by our PFF metrics. You got Giovanni Bernard and Joe Mixon coming out of that backfield. And Giovanni Bernard is a Christian McCaffrey-type player. Now, he's not the starter, plays behind Joe Mixon, but I think it speaks to the versatility that they have in their backfield. And so the offensive line is the biggest concern. Jonas Williams was last year's first-round pick, didn't play it down in 2019. So now he comes in, should be a starter for them in 2020. I think there's more they need to do on this offensive line before we can pencil Joe in as a starting quarterback. And just like when they played Carson Palmer, when they drafted him, they didn't play him at all that first season. He sat the entire season behind John Kitna until they were able to get the team ready to play around a young quarterback. Got to be sure to protect them. And I think that's what they want to do here. Now, if they can get the offensive line built up rather quickly through this draft, they may be inclined to put Joe Burrow on the field sooner rather than later.
Joined by Solomon Wilcots, former NFL safety, award-winning broadcaster, analyst for Pro Football Focus. So you have Joe Burrow, no-brainer, going number 1. We're in D.C. Is Chase Young to the Redskins a no-brainer, or should they consider trading down?
Personally, I think it's a no-brainer. However, I do think there is a situation where if you could get a good edge rusher or a good corner and a good wide receiver in the first round. So if you got two of those three, not that I would hate to move off of Chase Young, but if you ask me, well, if we gave up Chase Young and end up with a prolific corner and receiver, would that be worth it? I would say absolutely. If we went and got another really good edge rusher and still end up with a great corner, would that be worth it? Yes. So if you got two of those three positions in the first round, I think you'd be really happy. If I couldn't get those, then no, I'm not moving off of Chase Young. I would be inclined to use the pick on Chase Young unless I can get certainly much more and kill two birds with one stone. If I could do that, then I would move off of Chase Young. So it becomes a 50-50 proposition. So
when you're talking about watching tape, I assume you're watching a lot of Chase Young as well. I mean, just watching him last year, he's just such a beast. I mean,
yes.
I know it's cliche, but he could be a once-in-a-generation type player. But do you notice any weaknesses with Chase Young? Because, I mean, I'm just a fan, but I don't.
Well, here's what maybe some of the conversations in the back room, and I'm not putting anything negative on Chase Young. He's a phenomenal player. He does check all the boxes, okay, in terms of his physical talent, his ability. At times he can be unblockable. He can overwhelm some of the best offensive linemen at the line of scrimmage with his power, with his speed, with his agility and quickness. Mm-hmm. Toward the second half of the year, if you were to watch him, you would say, man, I wish I had the same guy that I had at the beginning of the year. I know he had to deal with some controversy there, had to take a couple of games off, then came back. I would just say that the motor wasn't consistent, and certainly when they played in the game against Clemson, he did not make the kind of impact on that game that we saw him making at the beginning of the season. Now, I don't know why that is. But at the end of the day, edge rushers, the absolute best ones, are guys who can generate pressure on the quarterback, whether it's Aaron Donald, whether it's J.J. Watt, and even more recently, guys like T.J. Watt and Nick Bosa. Energy and that motor is always running. It's always on. And so this is maybe some nits are too small to pick, and it is a very small thing because I love Chase Young. I think he's a great player. If I'm a coach and if I'm drafting to my team, I'm telling the defensive line coach, get on him because I want to see a motor on him every single play. He's too good not to have his hair on fire when he plays on every single play. And I didn't see that against Clemson. I didn't see that at the end of the season like I did see it at the beginning of the season.
By the way, getting back to Chase Young and that suspension, shocker, he was suspended for the two easiest games, the cupcakes on that schedule. I think it was Maryland and Rutgers, but he ended up with 16.5 sacks. He probably would have had another 10 if he had played in those games. He would have had 26 sacks last year if he had played in those games.
Yeah, I think he broke Mike Vrabel's school record, right, for sacks in a single season at Ohio State, and we know they've had some good ones. Think about it. This is a guy that had a better season, say, than Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Mike Vrabel, some of the best ever. Right. What I like about the Joey Bosa and even Nick is that those guys play. Their motors are relentless when they're on the field, and to be really good at the NFL level as a rush guy, that's the difference between Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney sort of picks his moments when he wants to play hard, and other moments he sort of disappears, and now he's finding it hard to get that bigger contract. He wants to be played like this highly productive player, but his numbers don't match the most productive players because those guys all play like their hair is on fire on every single play in every single game, and that's at this level, that's what's required.